New glasses, who dis? What is the I Ching? To me, it is one of the most important wisdom books ever created by humans. And it was multiple humans. It wasn't just one person. It was many minds over many generations, millennia, who shaped this. But before we talk about the history, let's talk about how it's used now. The I Ching is an oracular system. You use it for divination. Basically, you come up with a question and you ask it to the oracle, and then you either throw 3 coins or you use yarrow stalks, and it gives you a series of 6 lines called a hexagram. There are 64 of these hexagrams, and whichever one you get is the answer to your question. Here is a chart of the 64 hexagrams. You would see which one yours is, and then go look it up in a book and read it. As you can see, each hexagram is actually made up of 2 trigrams. And so these are those on the side, and there are 8 of them. You have the Father, heaven, you have Tui, the lake, Li, the fire, and so on. And so you have one on top and one on bottom. And since these represent different forces of nature, and in my opinion are one of the first great memory palace systems in the world, they work together. And so part of what you get out of the hexagram is how this top trigram is going to relate to this bottom trigram. And if you want to know how to do the coin method yourself, here's a nice little chart I found. And you'll notice that it either comes out as a yin line, a feminine line, or a yang line, a masculine line. But there are 2 types. The top ones are the older yang and older yin. Those are what's called changing lines. So when you read your hexagram entry in one of those editions of I Ching I linked to in the last video, you'll get to the end and then there'll be the lines. And there'll be a couple of sentences about each of the lines of the hexagram. And so those are the changing lines that you see here. You read the lines just that are changing lines, and those are further elucidations about your question. And then what you do after that, reading them, is you switch those lines to their opposite. Of those changing lines, the yang become yin and the yin become yang, and they give you a brand new hexagram. That's supposed to be the completed hexagram of what would happen if you follow through with what this first hexagram is saying. Now let's talk about the history, because I think it is so fascinating. It is probably around 2000 BCE that the I Ching started to be assembled. And at that point, they were using either turtle shells, or they were sacrificing oxen and then putting their bones in the fire and seeing how the cracks would form. And you could use them to find your hexagrams that way. And the first Bronze Age oracles were pretty simple. They were things about farming matters, about going to war with enemies, how many you'd have to things you'd have to sacrifice to have good luck. And it was not the wisdom book that you see today. It was a very practical divination system that we can tell from the archaeological record was used by kings, obviously, but also used by the common people as well. When you had troubles, you would go and ask the local soothsayer, and they would use the oracle as a way to help you figure out what to do, which is exactly what I did a ton during my early 20s, and used the book so much that now in my 30s and 40s, I feel like I've integrated it a lot more and don't need to ask it every question, but I still ask it a question whenever something big comes up in my life. Anyway, through the course of history, as more and more minds and sages use this system, more and more mystical, cosmological ideas got tied up and pinned to it. And by the time of a historical figure called King Wen, it's said that King Wen, when he was imprisoned by an opposing king, he composed those lines that you read, and that was the last addition to the I Ching. And also that he rearranged how the trigrams are related to each other to something called the inner family system, which I think is a very powerful memory palace type system. And from there, the I Ching was more codified, and at that point, it was a mystical system that also talked about Chinese alchemy, that talked about their system of religion, as above, so below, and also was a tool for anybody to just ask questions of the oracle. Its influence on all of Asia was huge. It was a huge influence on Confucianism, on Taoism, on Buddhism, and its thinking not only influenced Chinese history, but of all of the states around it as well. The I Ching started to slowly spread to the West. The famous polymath mathematician Leibniz was very much into it in the 1700s, and by 1900s, Western intellectuals were well aware of it. And by the hippie era in the 1960s, lots of people were using the I Ching, the Wilhelm Baines version specifically. And I think its role in Western society is probably underrated because a lot of smart people really got into it, and it is such a helpful tool. For me, it is the most helpful tool I've ever found in my life of collecting wisdom books and using divination tools. It is the best thing I've ever seen. And I'd encourage you to just give it a try. There's apps for it. The coin method is easy. There's free versions of the I Ching online. You can just do it right now and ask it simple questions, hard questions. You'll be surprised at how good the answers are you get. And you would also be surprised after a couple months that you would think that there is actually a spirit or a force behind it. At least that's what I believe.